No, you must take them. They aren't anything very special anyway. I have a lot of old kimono and no costumes left by my husband. I have no use for them. I thought it would be nice for you to have some. I do hope you won't refuse now that I have ordered them to fit you. If you don't take them, they will just go to waste. She went behind Musashi and held up the kimono for him to slip his arms into. As he put it on, he realized the silk was of very good quality and felt more embarrassed than ever. The sleeveless cloak was particularly fine. It must have been imported from China. The hem was gold brocade, the lining silk crepe, and the leather fastening straps had been dyed purple. It looks perfect on you, exclaimed the widow. Jotaro, looking on enviously, suddenly said to her, "What are you going to give me?" The widow laughed. "You should be happy for the chance to accompany your fine master." "Ah," grumbled Jotaro, "who wants an old kimono anyway? Is there anything you do want?" Running to the wall in the anteroom and taking a no mask down from its hook, the boy said, yes, this. He had coveted it since first spying it the night before, and now he rubbed it tenderly against his cheek. Musashi was surprised at the boy's good taste. He himself had found it admirably executed. There was no way of knowing who had made it, but it was certainly 2 or 3 centuries old and had evidently been used in actual no performances. The face, curved with exquisite care, was that of a female demon, but whereas the usual mask of this type was grotesquely painted with blue spots, this was the face of a beautiful and elegant young girl. It was peculiar only in that one side of her mouth curved sharply upward in the eeriest fashion imaginable. Obviously not a fictitious face conjured up by the artist. It was the portrait of a real, living mad woman, beautiful yet bewitched. "That you cannot have," said the widow firmly, trying to take the mask away from the boy. Evading her reach, Jotaro put the mask on top of his head and danced about the room, shouting defiantly, "What do you need it for? It's mine now. I'm going to keep it." Musashi, surprised and embarrassed by his ward's conduct, made an attempt to catch him, but Jotaro stuffed the mask into his kimono and flew down the stairs, the widow giving chase. Although she was laughing, not angry at all, she clearly didn't intend to part with the mask. Presently, Jotaro climbed slowly back up the stairs. Musashi, ready to scold him severely, was seated with his face toward the door, but as the boy entered, he cried, "Boo!" and held the mask out before him. Musashi was startled. His muscles tensed and his knees shifted inadvertently. He wondered why Jotaro's prank had such an effect on him, but as he stared at the mask in the dim light, he began to understand. The carver had put something diabolical into his creation. That crescent smile, curving up on the left side of the white face, was haunted, possessed of a demon. "If we are going, let's go," said Jotaro. Musashi, without rising, said, "Why haven't you given the mask back yet? What do you want with a thing like that?" "But she said I could keep it. She gave it to me." "She did not. Go downstairs and give it back to her." "But she gave it to me. When I offered to return it, she said that if I wanted it so badly, I could keep it. She just wanted to make sure I would take good care of it, so I promised her I would." "What am I going to do with you?" Musashi felt ashamed about accepting first the beautiful kimono and then this mask that the widow seemed to treasure. He would have liked to do something in return, but she was obviously not in need of money. Certainly not the small amount he could have spared, and none of his meager possessions would make a suitable gift. He descended the stairs, apologizing for Jotaro's rudeness and attempting to return the mask. The widow, however, said, "No, the more I think of it, the more I think I would be happier without it. And he does want it so badly, don't be too hard on him." Suspecting the mask had some special significance for her, Musashi tried once more to return it, but by this time Jotaro had his straw sandals on and was outside waiting by the gate, a smug look on his face. Musashi, eager to be off, gave in to her kindness and accepted the gift. The young widow said she was sorrier to see Musashi go than she was to lose the mask, and begged him several times to come back and stay there whenever he was in Nara. Musashi was tying the thongs of his sandals when the dumpling maker's wife came running up. "Oh," she said breathlessly, "I'm so glad you haven't left yet. You can't go now. Please go back upstairs. Something terrible is going on." The woman's voice trembled as though she thought some fearful ogre was about to attack her. Musashi finished tying his sandals and calmly raised his head. "What is it? What's so terrible?" "The priests at the Hōzōin have heard you are leaving today, and more than 10 of them have taken their lances and are lying in wait for you at Hannya Plain." "Oh, yes, and the abbot Inshon is with them. My husband knows one of the priests, and he asked him what was going on. The priest said the man who has been staying here for the last couple of days, the man named Miyamoto, was leaving Nara today, and the priests were going to waylay him on the road." Her face twitching with fright, she assured Musashi that it would be suicide to leave Nara this morning and fervently urged him to lie low for another night. It would be safer, in her opinion, to try and sneak away the next day. "I see," said Musashi without emotion. "You say they plan to meet me on Hannya Plain. I'm not sure exactly where, but they went off in that direction. Some of the townspeople told me it wasn't only the priests. They said a whole lot of the Ronin, too, had got together, saying they would catch you and turn you over to the Hōzōin." "Did you say something bad about the temple, or insult them in some way?" "No." "Well, they say the priests are furious because you hired somebody to put up posters with verses on them making fun of the Hōzōin. They took this to mean you were gloating over having killed one of their men. I didn't do anything of the sort. There has been a mistake." "Well, if it is a mistake, you shouldn't go out and get yourself killed over it." His brow beaded with sweat, Musashi looked thoughtfully up at the sky, recalling how angry the 3 Ronin had been when he turned down their business deal. Maybe he was indebted to them for all this. It would be just like them to put up offensive posters and then spread the word that he had done it. Abruptly, he stood up. "I'm leaving," he said. He strapped his traveling bag to his back, took his basket hat in hand, and then turning to the 2 women, thanked them for their kindness. As he started toward the gate, the widow, now in tears, followed along, begging him not to go. "If I stay over another night," he pointed out, "there's bound to be trouble at your house. I certainly wouldn't want that to happen after you have been so good to us." "I don't care," she insisted. "You will be safer here." "No, I will go now. Joe, say thank you to the lady." Dutifully, the boy bowed and did as he was told. He, too, appeared to be in low spirits, but not because he was sorry to leave. When it came right down to it, Jotaro did not really know Musashi. In Kyoto, he had heard that his master was a weakling and a coward, and the thought that the notorious lancers of the Hōzōin were set to attack him was very depressing. His youthful heart was filled with gloom and foreboding. Hannya Plain. Jotaro trudged along sadly behind his master, fearing each step was taking them closer to certain death. A little earlier, on the damp, shady road near the Todaiji, a dewdrop falling on his collar had almost made him cry out. The black crows he saw along the way gave him an eerie feeling. Nara was far behind them. Through the rows of cryptomeria trees along the road, they could make out the gently sloping plain leading up to the Hannya Hill. To their right were the rolling peaks of Mount Mikasa. Above them, the peaceful sky. That he and Musashi were heading straight for the place where the Hōzōin lancers were waiting in ambush made absolutely no sense to him. There were plenty of places to hide if one put one's mind to it. Why couldn't they go into one of the many temples along the way and hide their time? And bide their time. That would surely be more sensible. He wondered if perhaps Musashi meant to apologize to the priest, even though he hadn't wronged them in any way. Jotaro resolved that if Musashi begged their forgiveness, he would too. This was no time to be arguing about the right and wrong of things. Jotaro, the boy started at the sound of his name being called. His eyebrows shot up and his body became tense. Realizing his face was probably pale from fright and not wanting to appear childish, he turned his eyes bravely toward the sky. Musashi looked up at the sky too, and the boy felt more dispirited than ever. When Musashi continued, it was in his usual cheerful tone. Feels good, doesn't it, Joe? It's as though we were walking along on the songs of the nightingales. What? Asked the boy, astonished. Nightingales, I said. Oh, yeah, nightingales. There are some around here, aren't there? Musashi could see from the paleness of the boy's lips that he was dejected. He felt sorry for him. After all, in a matter of minutes, he might be suddenly alone in a strange place. We are getting near Hannya Hill, aren't we? Said Musashi. That's right. Well, now what? Jotaro didn't reply. The singing of the nightingales fell coldly on his ears. He couldn't shake off the foreboding that they might soon be parted forever. The eyes that had bristled with mirth when surprising Musashi with the mask were now worried and mournful. I think I'd better leave you here, said Musashi. If you come along, you may get hurt accidentally. There's no reason to put yourself in harm's way. Jotaro broke down, tears streaming down his cheeks as if a dam had broken. The backs of his hands went up to his eyes and his shoulders quivered. His crying was punctuated by tiny spasms, as if he had the hiccups. What's this? Aren't you supposed to be learning the way of the samurai? If I break and run, you run in the same direction. If I get killed, go back to the sake shop in Kyoto. But for now, go to that little hill and watch from there. You will be able to keep an eye on everything that happens. Having wiped his tears away, Jotaro grabbed Musashi's sleeves and blurted out, "Let's run away." That's no way for a samurai to talk. That's what you want to be, isn't it? I'm afraid I don't want to die. With trembling hands, he kept trying to pull Musashi back by the sleeve. Think about me, he pleaded. Please, let's get away while we can. When you talk like that, you make me want to run too. You've got no parents who will look after you, just like me when I was your age. But then come on, what are we waiting for? No, Musashi turned and planting his feet wide apart, faced the child squarely. I am a samurai. You are a samurai's son. We are not going to run away. Hearing the finality in Musashi's tone, Jotaro gave up and sat down, dirty tears rolling off his face as he rubbed his red and swollen eyes with his hands. Don't worry, said Musashi. I have no intention of losing. I'm going to win. Everything will be all right then, don't you think? Jotaro took little comfort from this speech. He couldn't believe a word of it. Knowing that the Hōzōin Lancers number more than 10, he doubted whether Musashi, considering his reputation for weakness, could beat them one at a time, let alone all together. Musashi, for his part, was beginning to lose patience. He liked Jotaro, felt sorry for him, but this was no time to be thinking about children. The Lancers were there for one purpose, to kill him. He had to be prepared to face them. Jotaro was becoming a nuisance. His voice took on a sharp edge. Stop your blabbering. You'll never be a samurai carrying on this way. Why don't you just go on back to the sake shop? Firmly and not too gently, he pushed the boy from him. Jotaro, stung to the core, suddenly stopped crying and stood straight, a surprised look on his face. He watched his master stride off toward Hannya Hill. He wanted to call out after him, but resisted the urge. Instead, he forced himself to remain silent for several minutes. Then he squatted under a nearby tree, buried his face in his hands, and gritted his teeth. Musashi did not look back, but Jotaro's sobs echoed in his ears. He felt he could see the helpless, frightened little boy through the back of his head and regretted having brought him along. It was more than enough just to take care of himself, still immature, with only his sword to rely on and no idea of what the morrow might bring. What need had he of a companion? The trees thinned out. He found himself on an open plain, actually the slightly rising skirt of the mountains in the distance. On the road branching off toward Mount Mikasa, a man raised his hand in greeting. Hey, Musashi, where are you going? Musashi recognized the man coming toward him. It was Yamazo Tempachi. Though Musashi sensed immediately that Tempachi's objective was to lead him into a trap, he nevertheless greeted him heartily. Tempachi said, "Glad I ran into you. I want you to know how sorry I am about that business the other day." His tone was too polite, and as he spoke, he was obviously examining Musashi's face with great care. "I hope you will forget about it. It was all a mistake." Tempachi himself was none too sure what to make of Musashi. He had been very impressed by what he had seen at the Hōzōin. Indeed, just thinking about it sent chills up his spine. Be that as it may, Musashi was still only a provincial ronin who couldn't be more than 21 or 22 years old, and Tempachi was far from ready to admit to himself that anyone of that age and status could be his better. "Where are you going?" he asked again. "I'm planning to go through Iga over to the Ise High Road, and you?" "Oh, I have some things to do in Sugigase." "That's not far from Koyagyū Valley, is it?" "No, not far. That's where Lord Koyagyū's castle is, isn't it?" "Yes, it's near the temple called Kasagidera. You must go there sometime. The old Lord Muneyoshi lives in retirement like a tea master, and his son Muninori is in Edo, but you should still stop in to see what it is like. I don't really think Lord Koyagyū would give a lesson to a wanderer like me. He might, of course. It would help if you had an introduction. As it happens, I know an armorer in Sugigase who does work for the Koyagyūs. If you would like, I could ask if he would be willing to introduce you." The plain stretched out broadly for several miles, the skyline broken occasionally by a lone cryptomeria or Chinese black pine. There were gentle rises here and there, however, and the road rose and fell too. Near the bottom of the Hannya Hill, Musashi spotted the brown smoke of a fire rising beyond a low haylock. "What's that?" he asked. "What's what?" "That smoke over there." "What's so strange about smoke?" Tenpachi had been sticking close to Musashi's left side, and as he stared into the latter's face, his own hardened perceptibly. Musashi pointed. That smoke over there? There's something suspicious about it, he said. Doesn't it look that way to you? Suspicious? In what way? Suspicious, like the look on your face right now, Musashi said sharply, abruptly, sweeping his finger toward Tenpachi. A sharp whistling sound broke the stillness on the plain. Tenpachi gasped as Musashi struck. His attention diverted by Musashi's finger, Tenpachi never realized that Musashi had drawn his sword. His body rose, flew forward, and landed face down. Tenpachi would not rise again. From the distance, there was a cry of alarm, and two men appeared at the top of the hillock. One of the men screamed, and both spun around and took to their heels, their arms flailing the air wildly. The sword that Musashi was pointing toward the earth glittered in the sunlight. Fresh blood dripped from its tip. He marched directly on toward the hillock, and although the spring breeze blew softly against his skin, Musashi felt his muscles tauten as he ascended. From the top, he looked down at the fire burning below. "He has come," shouted one of the men who had fled to join the others. There were about 30 men. Musashi picked out Tenpachi's cohorts, Yasukawa Yasube and Otomo Benru. "He has come," parroted another. They had been lolling in the sun. Now they all jumped to their feet. Half were priests, the other half nondescript ronin. When Musashi came into view, a wordless but nonetheless savage stare went through the group. They saw the blood-stained sword and suddenly realized that the battle had already begun. Instead of challenging Musashi, they had been sitting around the fire and had let him challenge them. Yasukawa and Otomo were talking as fast as they could, explaining with broad, rapid gestures how Yamazo had been cut down. The ronin scowled with fury. The Hōzōin priests eyed Musashi menacingly while grouping themselves for battle. All of the priests carried lances. Black sleeves tucked up, they were ready for action, apparently set upon avenging the death of Agon and restoring the temple's honor. They looked grotesque, like so many demons from hell. The ronin formed a seeming cycle, so they could watch the show and at the same time keep Musashi from escaping. This precaution, however, proved unnecessary, for Musashi showed no sign of either running or backing down. In fact, he was walking steadily and directly toward them. Slowly, pace by pace, he advanced, looking as if he might pounce at any moment. For a moment there was an ominous silence as both sides contemplated approaching death. Musashi's face went deadly white, and through his eyes stared the eyes of the god of vengeance, glittering with venom. He was selecting his prey. Neither the ronin nor the priest were as tense as Musashi. Their numbers gave them confidence, and their optimism was unshakable. Still, no one wanted to be the first attack. A priest at the end of the column of lancers gave a signal, and without breaking formation, they rushed around to Musashi's right. "Musashi, I am Inshun," shouted the same priest. "I am told that you came while I was away and killed Agon, that you later publicly insulted the honor of the Hōzōin, that you mock us by having posters put up all over town. Is this true?" "No," shouted Musashi. "If you are a priest, you should know better than to trust only what you see and hear. You should consider things with your mind and spirit." It was like pouring oil onto the flames. Ignoring their leader, the priests began to shout, saying talk was cheap. It was time to fight. They were enthusiastically seconded by the ronin, who had grouped themselves in close formation at Musashi's left. Screaming, cursing, and waving their swords in the air, they urged the priest on to action. Musashi, convinced that the Ronin were all mouth and no fight, suddenly turned to them and shouted, "All right, which one of you wants to come forward?" All but two or three fell back a pace, each sure that Musashi's evil eye was upon him. The two or three brave ones stood ready, swords outstretched, issuing a challenge. In the wink of an eye, Musashi was on one of them like a fighting cock. There was a sound like the popping of a cork, and the ground turned red. Then came a chilling noise, not a battle cry, not a curse, but a truly blood-curdling howl. Musashi's sword screeched back and forth through the air, a reverberation in his own body, telling him when he connected with human bone. Blood and brains spattered from his blade, fingers and arms flew through the air. The Ronin had come to watch the carnage, not to participate in it, but their weakness had led Musashi to attack them first. At the very beginning, they held together fairly well, because they thought the priest would soon come to their rescue. But the priest stood silent and motionless as Musashi quickly slaughtered 5 or 6 Ronin, throwing the others into confusion. Before long, they were slashing wildly in all directions, as often as not injuring one another. For most of the time, Musashi wasn't really conscious of what he was doing. He was in a sort of trance, a murderous dream in which body and soul were concentrated in his 3-foot sword, and consciously his whole life experience, the knowledge his father had beaten into him, what he had learned at Sekigahara, the theories he had heard at the various schools of swordsmanship, the lessons taught him by the mountains and the trees. Everything came into play in the rapid movements of his body. He became a disembodied whirlwind mowing down the herd of Ronin, who, by their stern bewilderment, left themselves wide open to his sword. For the short duration of the battle, one of the priests counted the number of times he inhaled and exhaled. It was all over before he had taken his 20th breath. Musashi was drenched with the blood of his victims. The few remaining Ronin were also covered with gore. The earth, the grass, even the air was bloody. One of their number let out a scream, and the surviving Ronin scattered in all directions. While all this was going on, Jotaro was absorbed in prayer. His hands folded before him and his eyes lifted skyward, he implored, "Oh God in heaven, come to his aid. My master down there on the plain is hopelessly outnumbered. He's weak, but he isn't a bad man. Please help him." Despite Musashi's instructions to go away, he couldn't leave. The place where he had finally chosen to sit, his hat and his mask beside him, was a knoll from which he could see the scene around the bonfire in the distance. "Hachiman, Kompira, god of Kasuga shrine, look, my master is walking directly into the enemy. Oh gods of heaven, protect him. He isn't himself. He's usually mild and gentle, but he's been a little bit strange ever since this morning. He must be crazy, or else he wouldn't take on that many at once. Oh, please, please help him." After calling on the deities 100 times or more, he noticed no visible results of his efforts and started getting angry. Finally, he was shouting, "Aren't there any gods in this land? Are you going to let the wicked people win and the good men be killed? If you do that, then everything they have always told me about right and wrong is a lie. You can't let him be killed. If you do, I'll spit on you." When he saw that Musashi was surrounded, his invocations turned to curses, directed not only at the enemy, but at the gods themselves. Then, realizing that the blood being spilled on the plain was not his teacher's, he abruptly changed his tune. "Look, my master's not a weakling after all, he's beating them." This was the first time Jotaro had ever witnessed men fighting like beasts to the death, the first time he had ever seen so much blood. He began to feel that he was down there in the middle of it, himself smeared with gore. His heart turned somersaults. He felt giddy and light-headed. Look at him. I told you he could do it. What an attack, and look at those silly priests lying up like a bunch of cawing crows, afraid to take a step. But this last was premature, for as he spoke, the priest of the Hōzōin began moving in on Musashi. Oh, this looks bad. They are all attacking him at once. Musashi is in trouble. Forgetting everything, out of his senses with anxiety, Jotaro darted like a fireball toward the scene of impending disaster. Abbot Inshon gave the command to charge, and in an instant, with a tremendous roar of voices, the lancers flew into action. Their glittering weapons whistled in the air as the priests scattered like bees sprung from a hive, shaved heads making them appear all the more barbaric. The lances they carried were all different, with a wide variety of blades. The usual pointed, cone-shaped ones, others flat, cross-shaped or hooked, each priest using the type he favored most. Today they had a chance to see how the techniques they honed in practice work in real battle. As they fanned out, Musashi, expecting a trick attack, jumped back and stood on guard, wary and a little dazed from the earlier bout. He gripped his sword handle tightly. It was sticky with gore, and a mixture of blood and sweat clouded his vision. But he was determined to die magnificently, if die he must. To his amazement, the attack never came. Instead of making the anticipated lunges in his direction, the priests fell like mad dogs on the wild alleys, chasing down the Ronin who had fled and slashing at them mercilessly as they screamed in protest. The unsuspecting Ronin, futilely trying to direct the lancers toward Musashi, were slit, skewered, stabbed in the mouth, sliced in two, and otherwise slaughtered until not one of them was left alive. The massacre was as thorough as it was bloodthirsty. Musashi could not believe his eyes. Why had the priests attacked their supporters, and why so viciously? He himself had only moments earlier been fighting like a wild animal. Now he could hardly bear to watch the ferocity with which these men of the cloth slew the Ronin. Having been transformed for a time into a mindless beast, he was now restored to his normal state by the sight of others similarly transformed. The experience was sobering. Then he became aware of a tugging at his arms and legs. Looking down, he found Jotaro weeping tears of relief. For the first time, he relaxed. As the battle ended, the abbot approached him and in a polite, dignified manner said, "You are Miyamoto, I assume. It is an honor to meet you." He was tall and of light complexion. Musashi was somewhat overcome by his appearance as well as by his poise. With a certain amount of confusion, he wiped his sword clean and sheathed it, but for the moment words failed him. "Let me introduce myself," continued the priest. "I am Inshon, abbot of the Hōzōin." "So you are the master of the lance," said Musashi. "I'm sorry I was away when you visited us recently. I'm also embarrassed that my disciple Agon put up such a poor fight." Sorry about Agon's performance, Musashi felt that perhaps his ears needed cleaning. He remained silent for a moment, for before he could decide on a suitable way to respond to Inshon's courteous tone, he had to straighten out the confusion in his mind. He still couldn't figure out why the priest had turned on the Ronin, could imagine no possible explanation. He was even somewhat puzzled to find himself still alive. "Come," said the abbot, "and wash off some of that blood. You need a rest." Inshun led him toward the fire, Jotaro tagging along close behind. The priests had torn a large cotton cloth into strips and were wiping their lenses. Gradually, they gathered by the fire, sitting down with Inshun and Musashi as though nothing unusual had occurred. They began chatting among themselves. "Look up there," said one, pointing upward. "Ah, the crows have caught the whiff of blood, cawing over the dead bodies they are. Why don't they dig in? They will as soon as we leave. They will be scrambling to get at the feast." The grisly banter went on in this leisurely vein. Musashi got the impression that he wasn't going to find out anything unless he asked. He looked at Inshun and said, "You know, I thought you and your men had come here to attack me, and I had made up my mind to take along as many of you as I could to the land of the dead. I can't understand why you are treating me this way." Inshun laughed. "Well, we don't necessarily regard you as an ally, but our real purpose today was to do a little house cleaning." "You call what has been going on house cleaning?" "That's right," said Inshun, pointing toward the horizon. "But I think we might as well wait and let Nikan explain it to you. I'm sure that speck on the edge of the plain is he." At the same moment, on the other side of the plain, a horseman was saying to Nikan, "You walk fast for your age, don't you? I'm not fast, you are slow, you are nimbler than the horses." "Why shouldn't I be? I am a man." The old priest, who alone was on foot, was pacing the horsemen as they advanced toward the smoke of the fire. The 5 riders with him were officials. As the party approached, the priests whispered among themselves, "It's the old master." Having confirmed this, they fell back a good distance and lined themselves up ceremoniously, as for a sacred rite, to greet Nikan and his entourage. The first thing Nikan said was, "Did you take care of everything?" Inshun bowed and replied, "Just as you commanded." Then turning to the officials, "Thank you for coming." As the samurai jumped one by one off their horses, their leader replied, "It's no trouble. Thank you for doing the real work. Let's get on with it, men." The officials went about inspecting the corpses and making a few notes. Then their leader returned to where Inshun was standing. "We'll send people from the town to clean up the mess. Please feel free to leave everything as it is." With that, the 5 of them remounted their horses and rode off. Nikan let the priest know that they were no longer needed. Having bowed to him, they started walking away silently. Inshun, too, said goodbye to Nikan and Musashi and took his leave. As soon as the men were gone, there was a great cacophony. The crows descended, flapping their wings joyfully. Grumbling over the noise, Nikan walked over to Musashi's side and said casually, "Forgive me if I offended you the other day." "Not at all. You were very kind. It is I who should thank you." Musashi knelt and bowed deeply before the old priest. "Get off the ground," commanded Nikan. "This fee is no place for bowing." Musashi got to his feet. "Has the experience here taught you anything?" the priest asked. "I'm not even sure what happened. Can you tell me?" "By all means," replied Nikan. "Those officials who just left walk under Okubo Nagayasu, who was recently sent to administer Nara. They are new to the district, and the Ronin have been taking advantage of their unfamiliarity with the place, waylaying innocent passers-by, blackmailing, gambling, making off with the women, breaking into widows' houses, causing all sorts of trouble. The administrator's office couldn't bring them under control, but they did know that there were about 15 ringleaders, including Denpachi and Yasukawa. This Denpachi and his cohort took a disliking to you, as you know. Since they were afraid to attack you themselves, they concocted what they thought was a clever plan. whereby the priest of the Hōzōin would do it for them. The slanderous statements about the temple attributed to you were their work, so were the posters. They made sure everything was reported to me, presumably on the theory that I'm stupid. Musashi's eyes laughed as he listened. I thought about it for a while, said the abbot, and it occurred to me that this was an ideal opportunity to have a house cleaning in Nara. I spoke to Inshun about my plan. He agreed to undertake it, and now everybody's happy. The priests, the administrators, also the crows. There was one other person who was supremely happy. Nikon's story had wiped away all of Jotaro's doubts and fears, and the boy was ecstatic. He began singing an improvised ditty while dancing about like a bird flapping its wings. A house cleaning, oh, a house cleaning. At the sound of this unaffected voice, Musashi and Nikin turned to watch him. He was wearing his mask with a curious smile and pointing his wooden sword at the scattered bodies. Taking an occasional swipe at the birds, he continued, "Yes, you crows, once in a while there's a need for house cleaning, but not only in Nara, it's nature's will to make everything new again, so spring can rise from the ground. We burn leaves, we burn fields, sometimes we want snow to fall, sometimes we want a house cleaning. Oh, you crows, feast away. What a spread! Soup straight from the eye sockets and thick red sake. But don't have too much or you'll surely get drunk. Come here, boy," shouted Nikan sharply. "Yes, sir." Jotaro stood still and turned to face the abbot. "Stop acting the fool. Fetch me some rocks." "This kind?" asked Jotaro, snatching a stone that lay near his feet and holding it up. "Yes, like that. Bring lots of them." "Yes, sir." As the boy gathered the stones, Nikan sat down and wrote on each one, "Namu Myoho Rengi Kyo," the sacred invocation of the Nichiren set. Then he gave them back to the boy and ordered him to scatter them among the dead. While Jotaro did this, Nikan put his palms together and chanted a section of the Lotus Sutra. When he had finished, he announced, "That should take care of them. Now you two can be on your way. I shall return to Nara." As abruptly as he had come, he departed, walking at his customary breakneck speed before Musashi had a chance to thank him or make arrangements to see him again. For a moment, Musashi just stared at the retreating figure. Then suddenly he darted off to catch up with it. "Reverend priest," he called, "haven't you forgotten something?" He patted his sword as he said this. "What?" asked Nikin. "You have given me no word of guidance, and since there is no way of knowing when we will meet again, I would appreciate some small bit of advice." The abbot's toothless mouth let out its familiar crackling laugh. "Don't you understand yet?" he asked. "That you are too strong is the only thing I have to teach you. If you continue to pride yourself on your strength, you won't live to see 30. Why, you might easily have been killed today. Think about that and decide how to conduct yourself in the future." Musashi was silent. "You accomplished something today, but it was not well done, not by a long shot. Since you are still young, I can't really blame you, but it's a grave error to think the way of the samurai consists of nothing but a show of strength. But then, I tend to have the same thought, so I'm not really qualified to speak to you on the subject. You should study the way that Koyagyū Sekishusai and Lord Koizumi of Ise have lived. Sekishusai was my teacher. Lord Koizumi was his. If you take them as your models and try to follow the path they have followed, you may come to know the truth." When Nikon's voice ceased, Musashi, who had been staring at the ground, deep in thought, looked up. The old priest had already vanished. The Koyagyū Fief. Yagi Valley lies at the foot of Mount Kasagi, northeast of Nara. In the early 17th century, it was the site of a prosperous little community. too large to be described as a mere village, yet not populous or bustling enough to be called a town. It might naturally have been called Kasagi Village, but instead its inhabitants refer to their home as the Kanbei Damasne, a name inherited from the bygone age of the great privately owned manorial estates. In the middle of the community stood the main house, a castle that served as both a symbol of governmental stability and the cultural center of the region. Stone ramparts, reminiscent of ancient fortresses, surrounded the main house. The people of the area, as well as their lord's ancestors, had been comfortably settled there since the 10th century, and the present ruler was a country squire in the best tradition, who spread culture among his subjects and was at all times prepared to protect his territory with his life. At the same time, however, he carefully avoided any serious involvement in the wars and feuds of his fellow lords in other districts. In short, it was a peaceful fief, governed in an enlightened manner. Here, one saw no traces of the depravity or degeneracy associated with footloose samurai. It was quite unlike Nara, where ancient temples celebrated in history and folklore were being left to go to seed. Disrupted elements simply were not permitted to enter into the life of this community. The setting itself militated against ugliness. The mountains in the Kasagi range were no less strikingly beautiful at eventide than at sunrise, and the water was pure and clean, ideal water, it was said, for making tea. The plum blossoms of Sugikaze were nearby. A nightingale sang from the season of the melting snow to that of the thunderstorms, their tones as crystal clear as the waters of the mountain streams. A poet once wrote that in the place where a hero is born, the mountains and rivers are fresh and clear. If no hero had been born in Koyagyū Valley, the poet's words would have been empty. But this was indeed a birthplace of heroes. No better proof could be offered than the lords of Koyagyū themselves. In this great house, even the retainers were men of nobility. Many had come from the rice fields, distinguished themselves in battle, and gone on to become loyal and competent aides. Koyagyū Muniyoshi Sekishusai, now that he had retired, had taken up residence in a small mountain house some distance behind the main house. He no longer showed any interest in local government and had no idea who was in direct control at the moment. He had a number of capable sons and grandsons, as well as trustworthy retainers to assist and guide them, and he was safe in assuming that the people were being as well governed as they had been when he was in charge. When Musashi arrived in this district, about 10 days had passed since the battle on Hannya Plain. On the way, he had visited some temples, Kasagidera and Joririji, where he had seen relics of the Kamun era. He put up at the local inn with the intention of relaxing for a time, physically and spiritually. Dressed informally, he went out one day for a walk with Jotaro. "It's amazing," said Musashi, his eyes roving over the crops in the fields and the farmers going about their work. "Amazing," he repeated several times. Finally, Jotaro asked, "What's amazing?" For him, the most amazing thing was the way Musashi was talking to himself. "Since leaving Mimasaka, I've been in Setsu, Kawachi, and Izumi provinces, Kyoto and Nara, and I've never seen a place like this." "Well, so what? What's so different about it?" "For one thing, there are lots of trees and in the mountains here." Jotaro laughed. "Trees? There are trees everywhere." "Well, aren't there?" "Yes, but here it is different. All the trees in Koyagyū are old. That means there haven't been any wars here, no enemy troops burning or cutting down the forest. It also means there haven't been any famines, at least for a long, long time. That's all." No, the fields are green too, and the new barley has been well trampled to strengthen the roots and make it grow well. Listen, can't you hear the sound of spinning wheels? It seems to be coming from every house, and haven't you noticed that when travelers in fine clothing pass by, the farmers don't look at them enviously? Anything else? As you can see, there are many young girls walking the fields. This means that the district is well off, that life is normal here, the children are growing up healthy, the old people are treated with due respect, and the young men and women are running off to live uncertain lives in other places. It's a safe bet that the lord of the district is wealthy, and that the swords and guns in his armory are kept polished and in the best condition. I don't see anything so interesting in all that, complained Shotaro. I don't imagine you would. Anyway, you didn't come here to admire the scenery. Aren't you going to fight the samurai in the house of Yagyu? Fighting isn't all there is to the art of war. The men who think that way and are satisfied to have food to eat and a place to sleep are mere vagabonds. A serious student is much more concerned with training his mind and disciplining his spirit than with developing martial skills. He has to learn about all sorts of things: geography, irrigation, the people's feelings, their manners and customs, their relationship with the lord of the territory. He wants to know what goes on inside the castle, not just what goes on outside it. He wants essentially to go everywhere he can and learn everything he can. Musashi realized this lecture probably meant little to Chotaro, but he felt it necessary to be honest with the child and not give him halfway answers. He showed no impatience at the boy's many questions, and as they walked along, he continued to give thoughtful and serious replies. After they had seen what there was to see of the exterior of Koyagyū Castle, as the main house was properly known, and taken a good look all around the valley, they started back to the inn. There was only one inn, but it was a large one. The road was a section of the Eagle High Road, and many people making pilgrimages to the Choruriji or Kasagidera stayed the night here. In the evening, 10 or 12 pack horses were always to be found tied to the trees near the entrance or under the front eaves. The maid who followed them to their room asked, "Have you been out for a walk?" In her mountain climbing trousers, she might have been mistaken for a boy, were it not for her girl's red obi. Without waiting for an answer, she said, "You can take your bath now, if you like." Musashi started for the bathroom, while Chotaro, sensing that here was a new friend of his own age, asked, "What's your name?" "I don't know," answered the girl. "You must be crazy if you don't know your own name. It's Culture." "That's a funny name," Jotaro laughed. "What's funny about it?" demanded Culture, striking him with her fist. "She hit me," yelled Jotaro. From the folded clothing on the floor of the anteroom, Musashi knew there were other people in the bath. He took off his own clothes and opened the door into the steaming bathroom. There were three men talking jovially, but catching sight of his brawny body, they stopped as though a foreign element had been introduced into their midst. Musashi slipped into the communal bath with a contented sigh, his 6-foot frame causing the hot water to overflow. For some reason, this startled the three men, and one of them looked straight at Musashi, who had leaned his head against the edge of the pool and closed his eyes. Gradually, they took up their conversation where they had left off. They were washing themselves outside the pool. The skin of their backs was white and their muscles pliant. They were apparently city people, for their manner of speech was polished and urbane. What was his name, the samurai from the house of Koyagyū? I think he said it was Shoulder Kizamon. If Lord Koyagyū sends a retainer to convey a refusal to a match, he can be as good as he is said to be. According to Shoda, Sekishusai retired and never fights anyone anymore. Do you suppose that's the truth, or was he just making it up? Oh, I don't think it's true. It's much more likely that when he heard the second son of the house of Yoshioka was challenging him, he decided to play it safe. Well, he was tactful at least, sending fruit and saying he hoped we would enjoy our stopover. Yoshioka Musashi lifted his head and opened his eyes. Having overheard someone mention Danshichiro's trip to Ise while he was at the Yoshioka school, Musashi assumed that the three men were on their way back to Kyoto. One of them must be Danshichiro. Which one? I don't have much luck with baths. Baths, thought Musashi ruefully. First, Osugi tricked me into taking a bath, and now, again with no clothes on, I ran into one of the Yoshiokas. He's bound to have heard of what happened at the school. If he knew my name was Miyamoto, he would be out that door and be back with his sword in no time. But the three paid him no attention. To judge from their talk, as soon as they had arrived, they had sent a letter to the house of Koyagyū. Apparently, Sekishusai had had some connection with Yoshioka Kempo back in the days when Kempo was tutor to the shoguns. No doubt because of this, Sekishusai could not let Kempo-san go away without acknowledging his letter and had therefore sent Shoda to pay a courtesy call at the inn. In response to this, the best these city youths could say was that Sekishusai was tactful, that he had decided to play it safe, and that he couldn't be as good as he is said to be. They seemed exceedingly satisfied with themselves, but Musashi thought them ridiculous. In contrast to what he had seen of Koyagyū Castle and the unenviable state of the area's inhabitants, they appeared to have nothing better to offer than clever conversation. It reminded him of a saying about the frog at the bottom of a well, unable to see what was going on in the outside world. Sometimes he was thinking it was the other way around. These pampered young sons of Kyoto were in a position to see what was happening at the center of things and to know what was going on everywhere, but it would not have occurred to them that while they were watching the great open sea, somewhere else at the bottom of a deep well, a frog was steadily growing larger and stronger. Here in Koyagyū, well away from the country's political and economic center, sturdy samurai had for decades been leading a healthy rural life, preserving the ancient virtues, correcting their weak points, and growing in stature. With the passage of time, Koyagyū had produced Koyagyū Muneyoshi, a great master of the martial arts, and his son, Lord Munenori of Tajima, whose prowess had been recognized by Ieyasu himself. And there were also Muneyoshi's older sons, Gorozaemon and Toshikatsu, famous throughout the land for their bravery, and his grandson, Hyogo Toshi, whose prodigious feats had earned him a highly paid position under the renowned general Kato Kiyomasa of Higo. In fame and prestige, the house of Koyagyū did not rank with the house of Yoshioka, but in terms of ability, the difference was a thing of the past. Danshichiro and his companions were blind to their own arrogance. Musashi nevertheless felt a little sorry for them. He went over to a corner where water was piped into the room, and doing his headband, he seized a handful of clay and began scrubbing his scalp. For the first time in many weeks, he treated himself to the luxury of a good shampoo. In the meantime, the men from Kyoto were finishing their bath. Ah, that felt good. Indeed, it did. Now, why don't we have some girls in to pour our sake for us? Splendid idea, splendid. The three finished drying themselves and left. After a thorough wash and another soak in the hot water, Musashi too dried off, tied up his hair, and went back to his room. There he found the boyish-looking coacher in tears. What happened to you? It's that boy of yours, sir. Look where he hit me. That's a lie, Jotaro cried angrily from the opposite corner. Musashi was about to scold him, but Jotaro protested. The dope said you were weak. That's not true. I didn't. You did too.